Hey friends, welcome back to another video about Calculate, and let's dive a little bit deeper into context transition. Let's have another example for that. We already talked about that. Context transition means that row context is actually applied and gets converted into a filter context, which means that if we have a table in here, like for instance our dates table, that means we always have a row context, which is in this case each individual day, so each row, and this row can be converted into a filter context. This is basically context transition, and Calculate is a measure which allows us to do that. And let's actually visualize an example in here, okay? So first, let me actually create a new page and let me name this context transition as an example. Okay, so what I want is I want to have here another table with, in this case, dates column. So I can go to my modifier here, and actually I like to have the same table. So that is why I was Control Z to copy this, and then I paste this back in here. So to get exactly the same table, and I just remove, in this case, the shipping sales. I don't need them for now. Okay, so let me untick this here, and let's stick to our default table, this one here. Now, let's say we are interested in the sales figures, that is true, but what we actually want is we want to figure out a way how we can calculate the maximum amount for a specific day across all the year-month combinations. So I would like to see, not for July 2019, the total amount in this month. I would like to see here what was actually the total amount on the highest selling day within this month. That's what I want. So I actually need to remove this kind of context I have here, and I need to go deeper into my data set and evaluate each row in July and figuring out, okay, based on the days in July, which was the day with the highest amount of sales, and actually what was this amount of sales. So let's do that. At first, I like to create a new measure. So let me right click on my orders table here and select new measure. So take this option, and then let's just wait. And here we go, there's our measure. And now let's actually create the measure itself. So let's say these are our maximum sales. So I call it max sales. And I use a double X. You'll see in a minute why, because we use an iterator function, which is the max X function. So we type in max here, and there are two functions here, actually three, but the max here is simply what is the maximum of, in this case, two scalar values. But we want to use the max X function, which is an iterator function. Remember, all the functions ending with an X in Power BI are iterator functions. An iterator means it iterates over each row in the table you have, in your data table. So that's what we need. We use an iterator. So that is why the first argument will always be a table for the X functions. So the table is the dates table because we want to iterate over the dates table. So we want to go through each row in the dates table, which makes sure that we iterate actually for each day, even though in our current visual, we only show the day and month level. So iterate through all dates, so each row in the dates table, okay? And then we want to apply, in this case, calculate. So because we need to make context transition happen, so use calculate function here. And then we use another iterate function, which is the sum x, not sum y, sum x function, and it needs a table. In this case, we are going through the orders table, so orders. And within the orders table, we want to multiply, in this case, let's say we have a selling price in here, selling price, and we multiply this by the amount like that. And then I can close this here. So far, so good. And then, of course, I also need to close the calculate function. And finally, of course, I need to close the max x function to iterate over. And now if I press enter for the max sales, let's evaluate this measure, and let's just see what we get. Okay, so let me just untick this here, go to the visual, and let's take the max sales. So add it to the visual, and let's see what we get here. So for here, for the first entry, we got 4,497. So what is this value again? This value actually now represents the highest or the amount of the highest selling day in July. And we can check this if I go to my Excel file here. I have here sales in this case in this column here. And if I take a look at July in this case, which is here based on the order date, here I got my July data. And on the 9th here, this was actually the highest. If I take a look at this one, you can see here, probably because we got here 3,000, which was actually the highest amount if I take a look at all these on the other days in July. So if we simply then take a look, this was the 9th, this and this, so we got 3 days in here. And if we simply use all of them and add them together, At the bottom here, you can see 4,497.37. And this is exactly actually the same amount we have here, right? So this number in here. So this formula works for us. And the reason why it works is, if I take a look at the formula one more time, is because we use the calculate function, and calculate function ensures that context transition is happening. So that means that the context we need is from the dates table, each row in the specific dates table, we want to evaluate each, in this case, some x here, each row in the orders table for the specific dates. And this also can also only be done with calculate. So if we, and I'm going to show you this one more time, if we remove the calculate here, if we say, let's say max sales wrong, so let me copy this here, and okay, let's enter here, and let's actually create another measure here, right click, new measure, and now let's paste this inside and say these are the max sales, but the wrong ones, right? So call them wrong, and then I remove the calculate function. Everything else remains the same. I just say I remove the calculate function, then of course I can also remove the parentheses here, and that's it. Beside this, the formula is exactly the same, but now without calculate. And if we do this and press enter, we will see that the context transition will not happening. So that means that it will not evaluate each row in the orders table. And that is why if I use this measure now, the max sales wrong, take this option, and please follow me here, you will see that you get here actually the same results as in the total sales here. And just by the way, I know sometimes it is a little bit misleading. Why is there a difference, as you can see here and here? The simple reason for this is that in my data set, the sales column, which is currently referring to total sales here, so if we go down to total sales, this one here, the sales column is a little bit different than multiplying here what we've done in our max sales column here, the selling price times the amount. So there's a slight difference. That is why you see differences in here, right? And I can show this to you, or I can prove it to you, if I go to my, in this case, max sales, and I use this measure here. So sum x orders, order selling price times orders order amount. So if I simply use this function here, I copy this, and if I right click, where is it, on my orders table and create a new measure and call this, let's say, total sales 2, just as an alternative, equals to that. So of course, one parenthesis is too much. And that's the formula. Pretty easy, actually. We use a sum x iterator function. We iterate over the orders table, which means we go row by row through the orders table, and then we multiply the selling price times the amount. So instead of referring to the column directly, the sales column, we simply multiply the price times the amount. And normally the result should be the same, but in my data set there's a slight difference. That is why you can see here differences in these values. Okay, so you also see they are not always different. Here, for instance, they are the same, but sometimes they're different. So, and I can check that. So if we evaluate our total sales based on this column, or based on those two columns, and then take a look at our total sales number 2, take this option here and take this option here, that's basically here exactly the same values here, okay? So don't get confused here, I'm sorry for that. That's simply the difference between those columns in here, but here you get exactly the same values as here, okay? So total sales, if you evaluate like the selling price times the amount, then this would be the value you get in here, okay? And here you see that without actually applying calculate, as we've done here, context transition will not happen. And if context transition is not happening, then you get the same result here for the total sales as for the max, which actually you don't want. You want to have context transition, and you only get this using calculate function, as you can hear, right? With the max sales, the correct one, this one here. And based on the beginning of the course, remember, we also evaluated, or I've told you that context transition automatically happens if you use a measure. So what we could do instead of using calculate and sum x orders amounts, because now we actually created total sales number 2, we could do it the same way. So we could say, let's create a new sales, max sales number 2, but this time it will be correct. So I right click on my orders table, create a new measure in here. And then for this measure, let's say here, this will be our max sales, and use the capital X. So let's call that max sales 2, and then is equal to. And now here we say we want to use the max x function. So again, we iterate here over a table. The table will be our dates table. So I'm referring to dates here. And this time as an expression, I will refer to the total sales, which we have created here, right? Remember, this was the sum x based on basically the selling price times the amount. And that's basically it. So it's a little bit shorter because now we do not use calculate and then sum x and so on. We're only referring to the measure here. And measures by default have the calculate function wrapped around them implicitly. So that means what you can see here, total sales, is actually calculate and then total sales. So that's why context transition is here applied automatically. And that is why at the end, if I evaluate this function here like that, and also add it to the table, so make this table a little bigger and add the max sales 2 here, you will see that again you get exactly the same values as here. Even though the only difference here between the max sales here actually is that instead of referring to, take a look at the max sales again, doing this completely in here using calculate and sum x and so on, we create instead a measure which has this part here, so this one to the end. This is actually put into total sales number 2, as you can see here. And if we do this, then there's no need for us to also write a calculate. We can simply refer to the measure directly without using calculate because the calculate will get applied automatically. Okay, so that's another example for context transition, and that's it for this video. So thanks a lot for following along, and as always, wish you all the best and see you in the next video. Until then, best guys.